Well, good morning and welcome to our adult forum, a forum about the Legacy Society of St. Mary's, how to make an eternal difference here at St. Mary's, even when you are up in heaven in your great beyond. Thank you for joining me today. I want to talk really quickly, give you a theological overview, and then dive down to some just very specifics, how this is possible. First of all, can anyone tell me the difference between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea? No? I should have a picture. Are you familiar with these two seas? They are in the Holy Land. They start north, they flow south. The Galilee is a very, very small body of water. The Dead Sea is ginormous. That is a technical term. But what is the difference? Does anyone take a guess? Well, what do we think the Dead Sea is? So the Dead Sea is dead. Nothing can grow in it because of the tremendous amount of salt water that is in it. So it's one of those things where you can kind of float because the salt is so dense. Whereas Galilee, while it is very small, it is the breadbasket of the nation of Israel. Even today, it is surrounded by life. It's overflowing with farms, kibbutzes that are growing things. It is teeming with life. And the reason why is because the Sea of Galilee receives the river of Jordan and then lets it go underneath, whereas the Dead Sea only receives the river of Jordan, but does not let it go anywhere else. And so I want to talk about how we are affluent when we allow our resources that are given to us by God to come to us and flow through us. In fact, the root word affluare, that we get the word affluent, is the Latin for to flow. So a part about being alive and alive in Christ is to receive that goodness and let it come from us. So it's like that childhood song we all know, love is like a penny, you got to give it away. Give it away. Do you know that one, or is that just a Methodist thing? Give it away. You end up having more. We're going to have to start singing. I'm going to have Eric sing it on the Sunday. So being generous is a part of the fullness of what it means to be human. It's how we become fully alive. The next thing I want to talk about is generativity. Erickson, who's sort of one of the founding individuals of human development, had these 9 stages, and I think it's number 8, but one of the highest levels of the human understanding is generativity, to be conscious of and intentional about giving to the next generation, whether that's people or an iteration that is coming. And so it talks about grandparents, being aware of young children, helping families, younger parents care for children. It's that life also, there is a period in the middle where it is sort of about you defining and becoming your own self. And then from that self, you learn to give back to others, to take care of and be present to the next generation. And so again, to give, and not just give, but to think of that what is coming next is a part of what it means to be fully alive. I would say both in the scriptures, but also in this individual I have no relation to, who came up with this idea of what it means to be the most dynamic, mature human being, is to think generatively. So coupled with all that is the idea of thinking to the generations. Now there's this wonderful part in the Hebrew scriptures where it talks about God will punish to the 4th generation, but God will bless to the 1,000th generation. And so we are called to be like God and to think beyond our current contextual time. At the very least, we should be thinking about our great-grandchildren in terms of the world that they are inheriting, the world we're creating for them. And in this case, the faith home and the faith community that will be present to them, and it will look very different than what it looks like to us. It's about thinking in this terms, how can the church be around in 80 years, 4 generations, in such a way that it is present and possible to be a source of life, of love, of grace and hope and community like it is today and has been specifically here for the last 135 years. Think generationally is to think that future members of this church are members of our own household even today. And here's the thing about this. Everyone is capable. And this is why, I want you to tell all your friends, everyone is capable of giving to the Legacy Society. It can be people who have tremendous wealth and means and make that type of generous gift. And all of us should be thinking about how we are going to make a substantial, to our own life, gift to our faith communities when we die. Now, we're not saying that you got to cut out kids or other things, but that it is important as a mature Christian to, when we die, to be thinking of this community while we are gone, because we're thinking to the several generations. And if you remember too, Jesus says, where your treasure is, your hearts will be also. And money is that way that we can make a difference in time and space when we can't be physically there. Does that make sense? So we have been blessed here at St. Mary's to have many, many gifts that have been tremendous to our well-being. One of the biggest examples we have recently is a gentleman named Frank Maynard, thank you, Frank, who left us his home, 2-unit home in the Mission that we discerned and then sold for a very, very robust amount of money, because homes are not cheap in this area. And a portion of that just goes to our general endowment that helps satisfy and sustain our ongoing ministries. But the vestry chose to designate some of that to fund associate housing. And so that we are able to pay Kira what is the average salary for an associate priest in this diocese. And then because of the cost of living, almost half of her salary comes to her additionally as a housing stipend. Similar to how I have a cash compensation, but my housing is owned by the church. But here's the thing. Those are lovely gifts and they're necessary, but also we have gotten hundreds of smaller gifts, 10,000, 100,000, that slowly but surely build up an investment reserve account that goes to our annual fund. So currently we have, I think, about $6 million in total of an endowment, which is good. It could be bigger. I'll get to that in a second. Some of that is for very, very specific purposes, but a lot of it is just for the general use of the church. And it goes to right now cover about, 5% of our budget? 10% of our budget? No, it's a little less. Somewhere between 5 and 10% of our annual budget.
It's going to be $165,000 next year.
Yeah, so a little bit more than 10% eventually. And this is money that thankfully we can use for any reason, but we do choose it now to use it to help, support our ministries. And these endowments are protected by various legal laws, by ethics of the church. You should look at our bylaws and look at our investment endowment structures. It's robust, and it's all the best practices out there. So a lot of these smaller gifts, if you will, they add up to do things like maintain our building. We have a capital reserve fund that is a large part of this structure that helps us, repair things. Someday that boiler is going to go under the church and we're going to need to get a new heating system. And thankfully, we're going to have some reserve to use that for, because those things aren't cheap. It goes to smaller projects, sometimes designated by the vestry. There are certain funds that people have designated, like we have a beautification of the church fund, although we highly recommend that funds come unrestricted because we have the best capacity to, listen to the Spirit and use in that regard. This is why I say that everyone who is considering this their faith home should be thinking, how can I give 1%, 2%, 10% of my estate when I die? Or how can I give a life insurance policy? I'll get to some of those specifics in a second. But yes?
What is St. Mary's annual budget?
The annual budget's about $1.2 million right now, and that's actually increased greatly in the last 5 years because of inflation. Our pledge base is about $800,000. Eventually, people pledge about $750,000. They usually give above and beyond that. And we have some other sources of income as well, like rental space, so it's not a lot. The bulk of our budget is paid for by pledges, and then we have a lovely endowment that is helping to assist that.
And money that comes in that isn't pledged.
Yeah.
So it goes basically money from parishioners.
Yeah, money from parishioners, open plate and such. But again, the biggest chunk is our pledges.
Can I just add one more clarification?
Sure.
Our bylaws say, and this is really important, that the first $25,000 of a request received that is undesignated automatically goes to that fund that is our capital reserve that pays for when the boiler breaks, when the water heater goes, when
Yep.
the locks don't work anymore,
Yep.
or whatever. And the things that we know are coming, that aren't budgeted on we're
Yeah.
going to do exactly this year. So this year alone, I mean, we've had 4 small requests come in that together are going to be more than what we're going to draw out, including to pay for extensive repairs of this wall over here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, so
Yep.
those things they top up and fund that really important. We have expensive buildings.
And I know churches in this diocese that are right now very, very healthy. They're considered one of the more cardinal parishes. And I can't name names, but I had one individual said to me, I have $2 million in deferred maintenance that I will never be able to cover as a congregation. And he knows that sometime in the next 10 to 20 years, the congregation will have to close. And we are not in that case right now, and we don't want to be. So, and the reason why this is important, I want you to tell all your friends, and I want you to join the Legacy Society if you're not already, is because if you remember Joseph's dream to the Pharaoh early on in his work, he had a dream of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows. There will be 7 years of plenty, and then there will be 7 years of famine. And we are approaching either the end of the fat years or the beginning of the lean years in the church. The truth is that the greatest transfer of wealth is just about to happen from the from the great generation and the older baby boomers to Gen X, millennial, and such. The thing is that the best time to start a legacy society was 25 years ago. The second best time is now. And unfortunately, it was a practice 25 years ago for many Episcopal churches, including this one, that when bequests like this came in, they became open discretionary to the rector or the vestry. And so I only know a handful of churches, and more of them on the East Coast, who've been thinking about this way intentionally for decades. And, they have $10, $20, $30 million endowments that really are what are going to be necessary because, as you can see, the world is changing. And the participation that we knew about in the last 50 years is no longer going to happen. We're getting older as a congregation. We're getting fewer as a congregation. And yet, one of my invitations is how do St. Mary's, or any church that you decide to move to, and to others who are younger, I would say, if somebody moves to another part of the country, I hope they would consider St. Mary's in their bequest, but if not, they need to consider the church they're a part of in this regard, because it's dependent on the Episcopal tradition that people are giving in this robust way. I lost my train of thought. Because here's what it is. We want to be around with a critical mass of people, healthy property, and money in about 2045, 2050. Because that's when the great generational shift of the next generation is going to be in charge. And we want to be able to be around like we have been around for the last 135 years. So, there are specific ways to give. I need to quickly say that I am not a financial advisor, and you should always talk to a financial advisor. If you want to look at these aspects, I'm talking to the camera, these aspects or others. But I do have a sheet here that says easy ways to remember St. Mary's in your estate plan. And it's little things like you can make us a beneficiary of your retirement plan or IRA. You can make St. Mary's a beneficiary of a life insurance policy. I know of one individual who's already shared that with me, that when he dies, there's a life insurance policy that will come to St. Mary's. You can leave a gift to St. Mary's simply in your will or estate planning, and that's a very easy thing to do. You don't have to change your whole will. There's a thing called the codicil. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. Talk to them about that. But it's just adding basically a one sheet piece of paper to your will currently that adjusts it to add someone like this. A great option, if you have this capacity, is to give a gift that's between 20 and 25. It's 20 or 25 times what your current giving is. So, like, let's say you give $5,000 a year. If you can give $80,000 to $100,000 to the church, you wound up endowing your current pledge. It's not that may be too much for some people, but for others, it is a possibility. And then there's other things like there's these vehicles like charitable remainder trusts, charitable lead trusts. There's a end-of-life beneficiary in terms of like monthly payments. There's lots of options that will ultimately benefit you and the church. But here's where you got to get your financial planner involved if you want. And I actually have an education in nonprofit fundraising, and there was a focus on about legacy giving. So I can certainly start the conversation with you. And I'm not a licensed professional, and we'll need to take that to your actual financial advisor. There, I think I've done my due diligence there.
Can I add a little something? I'm a holder.
Sure, but speak loudly so the camera can pick you up.
in California, there's something called a holographic will. And I mentioned it to my friends who've not done a big formal estate plan, only because if you sit down and in your own handwriting, write out your intentions when you die on your gifts, and then date it and sign it, do that as a placeholder unless and until you have met with your financial advisor, your lawyer, whatever like that, because that will be honored. And it doesn't have to be witnessed if it's in your own handwriting and signed and dated.
Great.
It's called a holographic will.
Gotcha. Cool. So you can pick this up as well, but I wanted to point out that this is our current list of Legacy Society members. This is in a very large form, framed on the steps that come up to the main office as well as to the balcony of the church. And again, this is a wonderful testament. We should have printed this in the bulletin today. We'll have to do that again next time. If a name is in italics, it means they're already with Jesus in heaven. And if it's not italicized, they're still with us. And it's just a lovely testament to the people who have given to this church so it could be around now and in the future to come. Along with that, I wanted to mention that maybe you are out there and you have us in your end-of-life plans, your request plans, and we don't know about it. So we have this sheet here that you can pick up as well called the Notification of Bequests. Oh, they're not? Oh, no. Here's what I did. I made it easy for you all. That way you can have to take less home. The truth is, if you happen to have a clean version, I will give it to you, but I gave it to you so you can have one sheet of paper. And, this is not required, but it is helpful. And I'm going to tell you one reason why it's helpful is oftentimes we'll get letters from financial companies that say, hey, you've gotten, $50,000 from someone's will. And we don't have any idea who it is. Now, we've got some great treasurers who can help us kind of piece this together. But the truth is that it's really helpful to know if you've got something like that coming to us, because there's not required from your financial institutions to actually tell us. And sometimes it's tricky to get that information. The other thing is that we have a policy here of anything that is a gift in kind of real property has to be approved. So, please don't, as I had someone once say to me, well, I don't know what to do with my mom's stuff, so I'm just going to give all that stuff to the church. Thank you, but we don't accept that. So anything that is actual physical property, we actually have to evaluate, accept, and I'll tell you right now, and the thing is we'll sell it right away. Unless it's something that can be meaningful for the church like that, but these are just specifics that help us. And then, finally, and I have them over there because I realize it's a part of this, but it's not fully directly, is that we're talking about when we die. And of all places, the church should be the easiest place to talk about that, because we believe in the life ever after, and in the resurrection, of Jesus and ourselves. And you can tell right now by the presentation, I'm sure there's hundreds of you at home though watching, that I think this conversation scares people in any regard. And yet one of the greatest things you can do for yourself, for your church, and let me tell you, your families, is to take one of these little packets we have and plan out some of the specifics of your funeral. This is a very simple sheet that we actually use for our funeral planning here. So yes, you're not going to know the date and the time. I understand that. But, you can choose your hymns. You can choose your readings. You can tell us if you want a Eucharist or not. You can tell us if there's people that, you would like to give a eulogy if they're around. It is such a simple thing to do, and it is so incredibly meaningful to your loved ones who are mourning. And to not have to make those decisions is a real blessing. So that is my presentation for today. Does anybody have any questions? All right, well, you at home, if you're watching this, I thank you for taking the time. Please consider becoming a member of the Legacy Society of St. Mary's and generously giving, to the extent that you can, to the eternal life here at St. Mary's through a bequest at the end of your gift. And you've got, not end of year, end of life gift. If you got any questions, give me an email. Thank you, bye.